Welcome to the World Autism Summit, and we have Steve Den Kaat here with us all the way from Australia. Isn't Zoom wonderful? Isn't technology wonderful? Steve is a
Okay.
clinical. Hi, Steve. Steve is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Sydney, Australia. And Steve has been supporting neurodivergent clients across the lifespan for the past 20 years in home, school, work, and community settings. Steve's primary area of interest is in supporting neurodivergent adolescents through self-identity and self-esteem challenges. And I understand that you worked under Tony Atwood. You studied with him sometime.
Yeah, I finished my clinical work with Tony actually up in Brisbane and did some work with Tony and Michelle Garnett. Their practice up in and practices up in Brisbane. And Tony continues to be a mentor. He's a wonderful guy.
That's great. So tell me what's inspired you to be part of the World Autism Summit.
Um, One of the main things I think that's probably inspired me, which was lovely to have the invite, so thank you for inviting me along, is that a lot of the work that I have been doing over the last probably 5 years, especially, has been more about getting information and knowledge out to the community. So much of the work I originally done or started doing to support individuals who were neurodivergent was all about all the work doing with the individual in the therapy room, and behind closed doors. And the realization as you go along that, you know what, it's not about the individual, it's about everyone. And the recognition that the upskilling needs to happen for everyone, to be able to work with a completely inclusive community. So I think that the opportunity to get as much knowledge to as many people as possible is one that just can't be passed by and can't be missed.
That is something that's a recurring theme that I am hearing throughout this entire summit. And I'm really thrilled to hear this from everybody. And I'm really glad that I'm sitting in this chair because I get to hear all this from everybody. Is the family and the inclusivity and everything. It's a theme that's, very much common. So
It is. I think it's a theme that is gradually being more and more accepted by everyone, in the fact that we are moving away, thankfully, from this view of autism as being this disordered individual, towards more of a, this is a different way of doing things. This is a different cultural way of processing and moving through the world. And as such, it has to be addressed and it has to be accepted and then embraced by everyone.
yes. How do you hope to make the biggest impact in the world, especially from the opposite side of the world, from us?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think as a clinical psychologist, my bread and butter is to work through individuals into the community. So I think that every person I work with is someone I learn from. And when I talk about supporting individuals who are neurodivergent, one of the biggest things is that nearly everything I talk about comes from neurodivergent individuals themselves.
Mm.
Uh, there is obviously impact of research, and we follow that very closely. However, it's listening to the voices of neurodivergent people and what their needs are and the barriers to them being able to express themselves and to be able to lead fulfilling lives. That's what we need to get across. So I think the big thing for me is being able to take that information I have, take those individual voices, and to be able to access platforms to be able to get that information across and help them to get their vision and their voice heard across the world, really.
That's great. That is so great. What is your biggest reason why you do what you do?
I think the biggest reason that I do what I do is that I have always found it difficult to um, to sit by and see anyone being excluded from any opportunity
Mhm.
just because of who they are.
Mhm.
Um, I think opportunities should be out there for everyone, and everyone should be able to have a go if they want to at whatever they choose. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to be great at everything, but I think exclusion purely because of any particular sort of characteristic or part of an identity of someone is just not acceptable. And I think that that's probably what drives me more all the time, to sort of be there for individuals to make sure that they have the best chance and advocate for individuals as we go.
That's great. How can we set up systems of success in partnership relationships around the world globally?
I think the way that we need to set up these systems is we need to be as flexible as we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think the rigidity that we have within systems that we struggle to change. It's interesting that the world talks about individuals who have autism and rigidity and challenges with change, but to be honest, all the change I see in the world right now is within the world of autism. It's the rest of the world that needs to be able to change the systems, to be flexible with those systems, to be able to adapt the way that we communicate, adapt the way that we structure the things that we do to make these systems work. And again, I think the collaborative approach is what's been missing, and it's having everyone's voice at the table. And if we can do that, and then we can be able to work together, then that's when the systems will change. But until we do that, until we see everyone at that table on an equal footing and listen to the narrative that everyone has, then change just won't happen.
I think listening and learning and opening our minds and our hearts up to listen to what other people have to share, because nobody has the only answer. Everybody, has an answer, but we can share and listen from each other.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Learn.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key. It's just being open-minded and being able to look forward rather than just being stuck in where we are.
That's so true. Can you tell us about your practice and your interest in neurodivergence within adolescents?
Yeah, look, the practice that I have in Sydney is one that was set up as a sort of neurodivergent affirming practice. We work from a client-centered approach. As I mentioned, there is so much that has been done to support individuals who are neurodivergent, but a lot of the time it's very sort of challenge, difficulty, deficit focused. Mm-hmm. And so much of the work that we found that was coming through was the direction was from community, from schools, from parents, from other people who were saying, we would like you to make these changes for our child or adolescent, our young adult. And I think that the big thing that we've learned as we've gone along is that if we listen to the adolescents themselves, then we actually can get somewhere. It's kind of a no-brainer that if you don't work with adolescents, then you're not going to get anything done, and you're not going to be able to help. And the only way you can help is to work with what that individual wants. And sometimes that's very different, or the agenda is very different for the adolescent from everyone else around them. And I think we need to be careful that that doesn't get lost in all of the difficulties and challenges that come along. As a clinical psychologist, primarily a lot of the work that I do is within mental health, and supporting those very significant challenges that are there that are really life-changing, life-restricting, if not life-threatening situations that come along for a lot of adolescents. It's a very difficult time of life. And as adolescents who are neurodivergent, the expectation on them to be able to manage that is huge. And so the practice has really been set up to remove barriers, to give adolescents and basically anyone across the lifespan who's neurodivergent the opportunities to sort of do what they would like to do and to be the people that they want to be.
Yes, it's often the time that we want to get them to listen to us, but we really, really do need to be listening to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of lose sight, I think, a lot of the time, of what the purpose of adolescence is. Everyone has their own idea of what that is and what we really need to focus on. But for myself and from the area that I work in, adolescence is about developing your sense of who you are, being comfortable with that sense of who you are. The skills, we can learn skills. The skills come along, but you need to have that good foundation, I think, at the end of adolescence. Once you survive adolescence, because it's a really tough time.
That's it. That's it. Surviving adolescence. I can relate to that. Yeah, I think people on the spectrum sometimes have challenges around getting through that too. And maybe, sometimes it takes a little bit longer too.
I think so. I think the other thing is that there's been a big, there's always been, and I think it's wonderful to have a lot of early intervention to support individuals who are younger and through childhood who are on the autism spectrum. But the reality is that a lot of individuals are not ready and don't want to do a lot of that work during that time. Just getting by in childhood and the amount of learning that comes and the amount of information that has to be processed is phenomenal and overwhelming. And so to try and add some of this extra information or this extra knowledge and learning, for some people needs to wait. And then it comes up during that adolescent stage, especially around that social change and transition that comes in too. So I think that, again, getting the timing right and recognizing that adolescence may be the time that we need to go there is really the response that we need to have.
That's good. Okay. What would you say would be the most common overarching challenge that presents in your clinical practice?
I think overarching, well, as I said, mental health is the typical day-to-day. This is what we really need to support. But when it comes to what's underlying that, or even the fallout from those mental health challenges, is this challenge of self-esteem within adolescence. I think when we look at the clinical presentation, 90% of the adolescents that I work with will have some impact on their self-esteem due to some of the challenges that have happened along the way and some of the negative experiences that they've had. And as the individual is going into the stage of life where there is so much self-reflection, where there is so much adaptability that needs to happen to working with themselves within the social barriers and social parameters that are there, we can start to see a lot of negative self-esteem start to appear. And unfortunately, when that's there, then it's very difficult to then sort of work with everything else that's there for the person. And they're battling anyway to manage in a world that just isn't there to be helpful for them. And so if we can support that self-esteem, again, we're not looking for high self-esteem. There's nothing to say that that's helpful. But if we can support self-esteem to be balanced and to be in a good space, then it means that gives the person a chance to access the strengths that they have, the abilities that they have, and the areas that they want to follow. And so they can then go down those paths without being too sort of restricted because of what their own self-efficacy and self-belief is. And I think that with all of the individuals that we work with, if we don't do that, then they'll just keep bouncing from challenge to challenge, especially around mental health, because it's their self-resilience and who they are within themselves and the belief in themselves that is going to take them forward into life and allow them to live by those values and who they are.
That is so true. I mean, they hit the ceiling too of after they, grow like to 18, 19, 20 years old. And then sometimes they're left not knowing what to do after that.
Absolutely right. And I think the thing is that it's the foundation skills, isn't it? It's getting in with those foundations so that the individual has something to take forward with them into those young adult years. And knowing that there are certain experiences that individuals with autism haven't actually had yet or haven't had the opportunity to experience, that they're not getting till sort of 18, 19, 20 years old, that some other adolescents have had at 14, 15, 16.
Right.
So that learning is still happening at the major time of transition from high school, transition out to the workforce, out to university, out to other areas of life in the big bad world. And so it's recognizing that those can be happening at the same time. And also that neurologically, I mean, we haven't finished developing yet. There's still some development there to happen. And so responding to that learning and that development as it's happening at those latter stages of adolescence too. So yeah, I think to be able to set ourselves up going into our young adult years and then through the rest of our lives, we need to have those strong foundations. And that comes from our own self-belief, doesn't it?
It does. So we want
It
some.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what everybody else says. It doesn't matter what anyone says to you. I mean, how positive people around you are. If you don't believe it yourself, then it's very, very difficult to work with.
That's so true. So we want some of what you have over here.
Well, hopefully we can get it everywhere. And I think this is the thing, is that making sure that we can let neurodivergent individuals know that they just need to be themselves, and be the best self that they can be. And whatever that is. And I think that goes for everyone in the world. But I think for anyone who's neurodivergent, and for individuals who have autism, is making sure they get the opportunity to learn how to develop those strong foundations for their own self-identity, and that sort of a balanced self-esteem, so that they can have that ability to do that going forward in life.
Right. So they can be prepared for the big bad world.
Yeah, because we can't be ready for everything. And we can't have, I mean, we can come up with all these wonderful strategies and ways of responding to things, but we can't be prepared for everything that comes. The big skill, and I think the big protective factor in anything is the ability for the person to say, you know what, whatever happens, I've got this.
Exactly.
And once you've got that belief that, okay, it's okay. Whatever happens tomorrow, I've got it. I'll be okay. And knowing that tough times will come and things change, but knowing that you will be able to respond in a way that you're comfortable with, and you'll be okay. You'll get through. I think that is the number one thing that prepares us and gets us through in life.
I like that. I've got this attitude.
Yeah. And I think that it's one of those ones that has to come from us. And it's, unfortunately, usually we don't believe we've got this unless we've been through so much already, to give us the evidence that we've got this. But we don't want people to go through all these really challenging negative things early in life to know that they've got this. And again, that's not helpful anyway, because ultimately, if it's that strong, then we end up with other challenges and traumas that come along that actually impede our self-efficacy and our self-belief. So I think that it's saying that you have the abilities, you have the foundations, you have the skills that you've learned, and you have the attitude and resilience to be able to go forward in life and take on whatever comes at you. And yeah, it's going to be hard. And yeah, it's not always going to work. And sometimes it'll be challenging. Sometimes it'll be distressing. But you know what? You've got it. You'll be okay. You'll get through it, and you'll get through to the next day, and you'll move forward, and you'll get it the next time.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I'll have to come back next lifetime and just do that instead of everything else.
No, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great to just run into that, just headlong? And again, I think that the world puts so much pressure on us that we don't believe we've got it, and we believe we have to change things and learn things. And one of the things that I saw very early in working with individuals with autism was there was so many children being told of what they couldn't do. And so children being told, you have this deficit, you have this difficulty, and also that you're someone who is going to need to learn all of these skills to be able to function socially. And the amount of pressure and the amount of anxiety that we put on these young people, and then making it that avoidance was always going to happen, because why would you try and do this? Why would you attempt to even do this if it's going to be so hard for you? That we've actually created so many challenges themselves. That being said, we do need to support children who have autism. We do need to give them the opportunities and give them the learning and the skills, but we have to be careful on how we do it. We don't want to be actually teaching someone that they are not going to cope, because that is the opposite of what we need going into adolescence and going forward in life. Because if they don't believe that they have any agency in this, if they don't have any control, any ability to make any change for themselves, then they're going to be so self-reliant on other people. And that's we did that. It's not the individual themselves. And so we've only got to look at ourselves, say, how do we need to change? And coming back to what you asked before, Karen, about the systems that we need to come in, that's how it needs to change, and recognizing the impact that we have on supporting individuals who have autism, and the impact that we can have in that change and making it happen in more neurodivergently centered and affirming, to make sure that we're working in the right direction.
That's great. Can you describe to us the core competence or components of your clinical practice in supporting neurodivergent adolescents through self-identity and self-esteem challenges?
Yeah, look, I'm just going to share this now so I
Okay.
can set up a. Um,
You've got, yeah, there you go.
is that it there?
Yes, it is.
Okay, fantastic. So I love Deborah Plummer's work on self-esteem. There are many wonderful workbooks and there's a lot of literature out there on self-esteem and how to support it. But the reason I like this is the way that within Deborah's work she's broken this down is if we look at it and look at what we're trying to achieve in these different parts of ourselves and things that we need to do in these different steps and stages, one of the big things we know for so many adolescents who have autism is that the ability to learn this information is there, the ability to move through these developmental milestones is there, but it's about how it's presented and it's about how we think about it. And so sometimes we have to break down this information into different steps and stages along the way. We know from the research on self, which has been going around for hundreds of years, that, and certainly in the last sort of 20, 30 years, the impact that our executive function has and our conscious thought and how we link our conscious thought to who we are internally is really important. And if we look at that executive function and think about it as the sequencing challenges that come along, then we need to be able to break down the instruction in self-esteem and the instruction in how to learn about ourselves in a way that makes it manageable for someone to work with. And so I like the way that this is done, and I like the way that it actually feeds quite well into some of the other work that I've used over the years. I started using this 10 years ago, and this alongside the self-understanding framework I've developed along the way to see how we can adapt this for individuals who have autism. And again, it's those individuals themselves that have told me, Steve, this is how you need to change this, because you know I can see what you're trying to achieve here, Steve, but it's not working. Or I think I know what you're getting at, Steve, but the thing is that that's not going to work for me, or that just isn't a way that I can do this. And that's fantastic. So that's my limitation. That's not yours. I now need to learn a way to be able to do it. So the core areas that we need to look at are these. And it starts with knowledge. A lot of the work on the self really changed with this move towards cognitive for everything, especially within psychology. And everything became knowledge. And if we think about from a strengths-based approach, one of the things we know for individuals with autism is that, yes, they have the ability to do all these things that other people are doing, but a lot of the time it has to be intellectualized. It's not necessarily come naturally. So there are certain pieces of information that the individual will need to go and get or be provided with that they're not going to get just in everyday life. So if that's the case, and we know that there's so much going on here cognitively, then that's set up really well for someone who thinks in more a logical and analytical way. It doesn't have to be that obvious. We can teach it if it's knowledge-based. And so many, not everyone, of course, but so many adolescents I've worked with who have autism, they're knowledge-based, and providing them with knowledge and being able to take in that knowledge and then adapt it has been phenomenal. And I think that's why we start with that knowledge base. So I think that this is a framework. This is a core set of things to work from. The reason I love it is that it starts with knowledge. It starts with a cognitive process. Yes, there are other things along the way that I'll talk about, and there are other processes that need to come, both biologically, emotionally, and socially. But if we start at that knowledge and intellect base, then we have the ability to work from it. It's just about how we present skills as we go. So if we think about the self-knowledge, we're looking at the person's ability to have, and this is the number one thing we need to have going forward, is a sense of safety. We need to be secure in who we are. And if we feel secure in who we are, then that gives us that sort of safety blanket, that safety net as we walk through the world. We walk through the world being impacted and bounced around by everything we do. especially other people. And apart from the weather, other people are probably the most unpredictable thing on the planet. So we have to recognize that we don't know what's coming. So if we have that sense of security and who we are, where we fit in, then that makes that a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
When we have that, when we have this sense of who we are and we feel safe, what we can then do within that self-knowledge is think about, okay, what are our values? What are, not the values that we're being given by everyone around us, but what are our own values? One of the big things we have within adolescence and identity formation is that we take all of the values and morals of people around us and the media and everywhere, and we take all that information and then we bring it together. And when we bring it together, we develop our own personal values, our own sense of who we think we are and who we want to be. And once we've done that, then we can move on to start to think about differences and commonalities between ourselves and other people. Now, this is one of the major areas when it comes to transition within self-identity and the belief in who we are, because when we look at the social impact of that, one of the big ways that we learn is from information and information from other people. But if we think about that and we think about how self-identity and we think about how self-esteem has been supported and taught and worked with, you can see why for so many individuals who have autism, it hasn't worked. Because everybody's going straight in with this. You need to recognize the difference between how you're doing things and how other people are doing things. It becomes behavioral, and it's not about behavior. To begin with, it's about the core sense of knowledge about who you are. You cannot make choices about who you want to be. You cannot make choices about how you want to move through the world if you're automatically being pressured into seeing this difference. And as soon as the difference comes in, what's going to happen is your self-esteem is actually going to decline. It's not going to improve. You're automatically going to say, hang on a minute. And it doesn't matter how many times we talk about, oh, we're talking about a difference here. We're talking about commonalities. Adolescents are extremely smart. And we have to remember that. And adolescents will see through us very, very quickly. And if we can use all the terminology that we want, but if they see it as a negative, then that will feed that negative self-esteem. And that will feed the emotional feedback that's coming in for them, which leaves them vulnerable to mental health issues. So we have to be aware that we do not jump straight in to looking at these differences and commonalities. We need to be able to get that secure sense of knowledge and self first before we move into the next stage. So here's a few things that we need to think about. I would say that all individuals, and this is not easy, and I think it's good if we have a think about it, Karen, as we're doing this, is that what do you like? And thinking about what do you actually want? But the big thing is, why do you want to be like that? Is it because it's something that's coming from you? Is this your values? Or is it because that's what everybody else does? Is it because that's what your teachers say you need to do? Is it because this is what your parents say you need to do? Your community says you need to do? Is this actually coming from you? Is this your own self-interest? We know from so much research about supporting, even academically, individuals who have autism, that unless you bring in self-interest, learning does not happen. It will not come in. There has to be a motivator, and the motivator comes from self-interest. Then you can start thinking of the kind of person you want to be. But again, that's very difficult to think about that kind of person you want to be. I love to work on what people's hopes and dreams are. I love to work on, we start at the ceiling and say, okay, let's go for the ideal here. And that's what we're aiming for. We'll shoot for that and see how close we get. Now, we have to understand that we're not always going to make that. And we have to set that up from the beginning, that this is our ideal and we're going to make the most of everything that we can. But we need to think about that. And there's no need to set the bar low. Right. There has been too many years, too many instances for individuals who have autism where people around them have set the bar way too low. And it's not giving the person the opportunity to be who they can be and go where they want to. So we want to know what their wishes would be in life. But the last one there, which I think brings in a really holistic approach to supporting and self-interest, is what do you think is good for you? You can go on the internet now and get all the wellness you like. People will tell you what's good for you. Everybody wants to tell you what's good for you, and everybody wants to tell you what's bad for you and what you shouldn't be doing. But there's a certain level now, I think, of the ability to bring back what your own beliefs are and your own self-interest is. And I think we're missing that. I think so much of what we do now is driven by, I've read this, I've heard this, this is the research I've got. But what's coming from within us? What's coming from who we are? What's that spark of ourselves that we all have, that we want to shine? And we want to make sure that that is coming from all aspects. What do you think is good for you physically, emotionally, spiritually, practically, and lastly, socially? Because that's the interaction with the world around you. So we need to be able to tap into that. But again, not easy. That takes work to be able to actually sit back. Number one, to have the time to sit back and reflect on that. But then the ability to do it. And within that self-interest, we know that one of the challenges is that when it comes to breaking that down, it's really, really difficult. I mentioned the other piece of research that I use quite a lot, and that's the self-understanding interview, which is one of probably the best things I've seen out there. Interestingly, not for what it was done for. As an assessment tool, I mean, it's okay. But as a therapy tool, it's phenomenal. And I think, and this is, I remember talking to Tony Atwood about this and saying, well, we've got this great tool that's out there that assesses someone's ability to what their self-understanding is and how they can do it. But how do we teach it? It's one thing to know what someone's struggling with, but we need to be able to help them to be able to do it. So one of the things that I've realized along the way is that if we can work on each of these individual areas, that will help that self-knowledge. That provides the framework to come in and have that self-knowledge of who you are. And you've got to be able to adapt it. You've got to be able to work with it, because obviously the underlying processes that everyone talks about getting in the way of this learning are our standard theory of mind, executive function, coherence, and the sensory issues that come in, because everything that comes in to form our identity is our experience. It's all our learning. And we know that so much of that experience and learning can be intrusive, can be overwhelming, exhausting, and highly anxiety-provoking for anyone who has autism. And so we need to be able to work with those underlying processes and say, hang on a minute, it's not that this is going to stop you from doing this, but we need to think about how we're going to do this. We don't want to add to the distress. We don't want to make this harder for someone. We want to be able to come into a process, again, that's secure and it's safe, that allows the person to move forward and learn these things. The reason that we have to, one of the main reasons we have to be able to do that and do it safely is that, as I mentioned before, one of the big challenges when it comes to developing our sense of self is that we learn from our information. If we, as human beings, typically assume that unless we learn otherwise, everyone's the same as us. We assume that if I don't get any information or knowledge about the way that someone else thinks about things or their attitudes or the way they behave, I'm going to assume they're going to do the same as us or same as me. And so the thing that gives us the change is the feedback. But one of the biggest difficulty is when that feedback is emotional. And this is one of the big things that really impacts our self-esteem, because the main sort of emotional feedback that comes in within that reflection and then becomes our self-regulatory feedback and regulating ourselves are these key emotions like embarrassment and guilt and shame. And I hear so much from adolescents who have autism about how much embarrassment they've experienced in the past, about how much shame they carry around all the time. And the difficulty is not being able to understand that or process that, or then to be able to work with it. So if you can't process that information and integrate it into your sense of who you are, then you are going to end up with this really fragmented sense of self, because you can't then take it on board and then use that. So the emotional vulnerability is really, really strong. And again, this is where we talk about, okay, when you're, as a clinical psychologist, when you're working with people with autism, what are you treating? Well, this is what it's shame, it's guilt, it's embarrassment, it's emotion. It's nothing to do with autism. That's the vulnerability to these challenges happening. But ultimately, we learn from those emotional experiences, so we need to be able to work with them as we go along. Once we know that we have the basics of being able to process some of that emotional information, once we know that it's safe to look at these emotional challenges and think about these key sort of feedbacks for regulation, then we can start to get the person to look at themselves and evaluate themselves. Now, again, this is really important. So much of children, older children and young adolescents' experience of evaluation has been negative from other people. So it's been, for some, a constant battle to manage that. So that's then difficult because, number one, it's difficult to then reflect on yourself and look at things that you're proud of or not proud of about yourself, because that's really going to trigger some of these negative experiences. But at the same time, it's teasing apart what you actually believe from what you've been told. And so that, again, comes down to the fundamentals of this. It's about the person's own understanding, their own beliefs about themselves. And I think that's when we can start to see some resilience come through and responses of, yeah, I hear that, but I don't believe that. And I think that's wonderful. And I think the ability to say, I get what you're saying, but I'm not going to take that on board. I think that's wonderful. And I think if we can do that more and really enhance and nurture this sense of, okay, I can evaluate that for myself. And again, that's how I know I've got this, because I know where I'm at. I know what I can do. I know what I struggle with. I know what I'm proud of because I've done it in the past, so I can take that forward. And I know what my limitations are. And we all kind of need to know those things. But again, it has to come from the person themselves. Now, the other part where this becomes difficult is when we take our challenges and our learning within ourselves and then think about, okay, how do we do that with other people? How does that work? As I said, so much of our learning typically as humans is social. And if you are not getting that social information, and a lot of children and young adolescents with autism are not getting this rich learning socially, because they're not getting the opportunities and they haven't been taught ways of taking in this information because it's not the same as other people, then when it gets to the relationship side, it can be hard. Because if you're going to go into relationships, and I see this a lot, if you're going into relationships, now that's friendships or romantic relationships, and you don't have a strong sense of your own identity first, it's very easy to get lost within that relationship. We know that from quite a lot of research that it's a reciprocal thing, and that when you're in a relationship, you tend to become more like the person you're in a relationship with. We tend to behave more like that person. We tend to even sometimes dress and look like that person. And that can happen over long periods of time, and certainly in couple relationships. But when it comes to even friendships, if you haven't got a strong sense of that foundation of your own identity, then it can get lost and it can be vulnerable to be taken over by other people. And that's very difficult, because that's when self-esteem really does crash, and you have to go back to those foundations that hopefully are there. If they're not there, then it's very difficult and mental health can be a challenge. But that's why relationships need to be cooperation. You need to work together with people in relationships. And that's all relationships. It has to be the reciprocal thing. Again, so much of the work for a long time has, and again, you can see it when you look at diagnostic criteria and things like that for autism, on reciprocal ability, both socially and emotionally. But what about the reciprocal accountability and responsibility of everybody else? And the recognition of how much impact that they have for someone who's neurodivergent. It has to be collaborative. It has to be cooperation. You have to work together to make relationships work. And that is not just the beginning of relationships, but maintenance along the way. It's about recognizing, okay, this is someone I want to have a relationship with, whatever that relationship is. And the identity, that person, that's who I want to be with. That's who I want to interact with. And that's that's going to keep me interacting with that person as we go along. So many times working with within relationships and couples and older clients who have autism, I've been changed along the way. I'm not who I wanted to be. This isn't the life I wanted to lead. I have had to change to fit into this life. And again, it's recognizing, well, okay, we can make choices to allow ourselves to make some changes and to go in certain directions because it's what we want and it's with our values, but we have to still hold on to the core sense of who we are. So the reciprocal effects are really, really important. And we have to make sure that we're aware that it is a two-way street. But in order to manage that, and in order to have the best chance of really strong connection and ability to merge with other people socially and within the relationships, a big part is disclosure. And we know that certainly when we're coming back to the emotional feedbacks and we talk about shame and guilt, the big thing about shame is that we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to sit and talk to someone that we care about and someone we think a lot about their beliefs and we respect them and tell them just about all our shame. But the reality is the more we talk about shame, the less power it has. And also by having that disclosure, that's what gives us this intimate connection and gives us this ability to really merge with our partners and our friends and relationships. But again, disclosure typically is a communication. So we need to work with how do we communicate that? We need to work with anyone who has autism and say, okay, how are you going to do this? How are you going to manage to communicate this information that is really important to you because this is a value you have, but we need to figure out a way of doing it. It's not saying that you don't want to, it's not saying that you can't, but we need to work out how to do that. So when you're doing that and you've got this foundation that you're starting to think about who you are, and you're now thinking about yourself and other people and relationships, in order to hold on to that sense of who you are, you have to recognize and think about, is there anyone else who's exactly like you? Now, again, unless you have the information that people are different from you, then you're going to assume that most people are like you. But the difference is are they exactly like you and what makes you different? And if you realize what makes you different from people you know, and I have to think about how am I different from people I know? And how do I have to adapt what I'm doing and what I'm thinking to manage to have functioning, positive social relationships? But you need to be able to reflect back on that. And again, that comes down to that sense of yourself. But again, you can't go there unless you've already worked on the fact that this can be a positive thing. You've got this. You're okay. You don't need to be someone else. Because if you go there first and start doing this, then it just pushes an adolescent further and further down this path that they need to change. And that's not necessarily the case. What we need to do is accept who we are, accept our strengths and the challenges that we have. But also, as I mentioned before, you've got this, you will make mistakes. We all do. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean anything about you as a person, apart from the fact that you make mistakes the same as everybody else. But it just says that you can respond to that and you're working the best that you can and you're doing okay. And that comes into that acceptance of yourself and your behaviors. You're accepting yourself in your relationships. You're accepting yourself in how you process emotion, or you process your attention and your experience, but also about who you are physically as well. And when it comes to self-esteem and it comes to mental health, one of the big challenges that we see a lot are for a lot of individuals in this having this difficulty of accepting themselves for who they are physically. And there's such a big overlap between especially our adolescent sort of females clients that we work with and these challenges within their physical bodies and their ability to accept themselves for that as well. So we need to make sure that we have that strong sense there to be able to accept who we are, and it's okay to be who we are. Now, interestingly, one of the areas that was found within the self-understanding questionnaire when it first came out and was used was that within those different areas of self-understanding, individuals with autism did pretty well on a lot of them and could do them just as well as anyone else. But one of the biggest challenges within this area of agency, and how did the person get to who they are and where they are? What made them or helped make them to be the person they are? So those are big challenges to recognize, what was my learning along the way? But again, that's very abstract, isn't it? It's not just thinking about what you learned, it's about how you learned it. And I think that again comes down to that foundation, because if we think about how we learn something, we can generalize that, we can move forward, and we can use it in other skills as we go through. And so this is why all this area of self-identity and self-understanding and self-esteem goes across all areas of our life. But a key here that I really bring in when I'm doing this work is when we ask someone about how they could become different, we have to also ask them if they'd want to be different.
Right.
That's a choice. And that choice has to be very clear. And we have to make it clear to anyone, any adolescent that we're working with, you've got choices here. You don't have to change this. This is the reality. This is what this potentially could look like if you continue where you are. However, you do still have the choice. But within that choice, that brings in that collaborative side of things that I talked about before, the cooperation, and it makes the person themselves believe within their safety, within their ability to see themselves going through the world in a safe way, that it is collaborative and it is reciprocal, and they will get that respect back that they're giving to other people too. Now, when we think about self-esteem, and we think about, especially within adolescence and childhood, this is probably the one thing that is so far down the list, so far into supporting someone on the self-esteem challenges that come in self-identity, that it's interesting that this is usually where people go first. And people would typically say to an adolescent, you just need to be able to do it. You just need to harden up. You just need to cope, get over it, and just be resilient. And so much I hear from parents is, my adolescent just needs to be more resilient. Going straight into resilience. And how unrealistic and inappropriate is that to expect that of an adolescent who doesn't have those other skills? We can't expect someone to know how to take care of themselves if they don't understand themselves, understand their needs, understand their views, their desires, and what they want. So we have to make sure that when we get to self-reliance and self-resilience, we can rely on ourselves. We've got this, but you need to build that confidence along the way. The foundation needs to be there first. Then we can build some independence and self-motivation. The self-monitoring can continue, and that's what we're looking for going forward, but you cannot be reliant on yourself unless you have that belief in yourself first. There has to be the confidence. Now, this is that time when you've got this self-reliance, you've got the self-understanding, you've got the self-knowledge, you've got all of these things happening. Now you can start to think about communicating it. So you can express what's going on. And is that going to be verbally, nor verbally? We talk about the challenges for a lot of people with autism and reading between the lines. Well, you know what? Make it clear what's between the lines. Let's just stop focusing on the lines and start focusing on what's between the lines, and making sure that our communication takes that into account. Let's stop hiding everything. Let's be completely transparent. We're expecting adolescents who have autism to be able to go into this and disclose. Well, let's disclose ourselves. Let's make sure that they're aware exactly of what the expectations are. Because unless we can think about how we communicate and we can come up with different creative ways of expressing ourselves, how are we modeling anything for that adolescent? That's not collaborative. That's not working together with someone. That's teaching, and that's directing, and that's controlling. And that's the last thing that we want to do for adolescents. If we can do all of these things, then it allows us to then get to a position where we can start to have some self-confidence. And self-confidence is where you start to say, okay, I've got this. You haven't got it unless you can be confident you've got it. So you got to know what your opinions are. You know what your values are. You now know that you've got the right to be you. And you can make a difference to anything that you do in your life. You know now that you can be flexible, but you also have the confidence that you're going to work collaboratively, and there's going to be flexibility both ways. When you accept the challenges that you have and decide to make choices that you want to make, then you can run with those choices. You can live with those choices, because even if that choice turns out to be a choice that has gone down a path that you don't like, you'll be okay. You've got this. And you can move forward with it, and you can come back. So you can cope with the unexpected. You can cope with things not going exactly the way you want to. Now, if you can do that, then we start to move towards more of an optimistic perspective. We can't always be optimistic, but we can go into things with an open mind, and we can go into things with the chance and possibilities that are there. So when we think about continuity of who we are, again, because our identity does shift, our self-esteem shifts, we need to think about, okay, who are we from year to year? Do we change? We change. And if we do change, and this is where we're really starting to solidify the self-identity and sense of self-esteem, is if you change, how do you know it's still you? What is it about you that is still you? You're in a different job, you're in a different city, you're in a different relationship, you're doing different things recreationally. How do you know it's still you? And you're not just a product of these things. So you think about where you've been, you think about where you're going, and you look at timelines and sort of concretely say, hang on a minute, this is where I was 5 years ago, and this is where I am now. Wow, there's a lot of change there. Massive change. Not all directed by me, but they happened, and I managed to get through it, and it's okay. But it has to be concrete.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've done that, and you've gone through all of those things, and you have all of that understanding about yourself and how you fit, where you want to fit, who you want to be, and how you want to behave, that's when you can now start to say, I can be aware. Now, again, so much work that I see and hear in supporting adolescents who have autism, especially around mental health, is going straight into you need to be aware right at the beginning. But again, the knowledge has to be there first. You cannot feel safe to sit in the here and now if there's so much anxiety and challenge of where I've been and where I'm going to go. Because it's not safe to do that. You have to hold on to thinking about what's coming up. And if you can't sit in the here and now and recognize who you are here and now in your identity, how can you set realistic goals? It's just very, very difficult because you don't have that foundation to work from. Mm-hmm. You recognize then that, yes, I've looked at the past, I've looked at how I've got to where I am now, I've taken the feedback from the emotional side that I've done, and then you can recognize, you know what? Emotional, physical change, it's going to happen. These things will be there. But it's part of my life and it's part of who I am. It doesn't change who I am. Mm-hmm. But the big thing and the last thing that's within this that I wanted to finish on is that you've got some control as to how you change and how you develop. And the control starts with choice. Mm-hmm. The control starts with, why are you doing this? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? And how do you want to work with that? And when you make that choice, knowing that you can change your mind, you can have that control from the beginning and you're working collaboratively. So I think, just to summarize it, it's recognizing that working with adolescents, we know we have to work collaboratively. Working with adolescents who have autism, we have to recognize that our flexibility is so, so important. We have to recognize that everything we're doing is providing this reciprocal information into the development of the identity of the person themselves, and take some responsibility and accountability for that to allow that person to develop into who they want to be. And I think if we can do that, we're probably doing the best we can. We can always do better, and we probably will learn, but for the moment, I think we're doing the best we can, and that's really all we can try and do.
Well, that is valuable, valuable information, Steve. I really thank you for sharing all that. And I can see that that could be so helpful, not just for adolescents, but also for people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, even just to, if they're struggling in their lives, to even have a glance back, and gain a lot of value out of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that it's continual. It's something that we need to come back and check on. And that self-awareness as we go through our life. We go through different patches, we go through ups and downs, we go through major environmental and emotional shifts, and every now and again we have to ground ourselves and say, hang on a minute, what's going on for me and where I am at this part of my life. And I think that that's something that if you've got those skills coming through adolescence, then the foundation there will set you up for every single thing that comes along the way. You cannot be prepared for everything, but as long as you know you've got this, you're going to be okay.
I learned a lot from me, and I'm more than 40, I'm over that age, but anyway, it's great. I loved it. So thank you so much for your words of wisdom. They're so, so good. And I know everybody at the summit is going to love this. and it's going to help so many people all around the
I
world.
really hope so. I really hope so, Karen. I just hope that we can get this message across to as many people as possible, and we can continue to sort of do. I mean, there's some amazing, amazing work that we're doing now to support individuals who have autism, and we just need to run with this momentum that we've got now.
Yep.
Not let it slow down, and just keep going as hard as we can to, again, recognize that our role in what we're doing and the impact that we have.
That's right. So do you have any final words to say to the audience?
I think the last thing that I would say is recognizing that we all go through periods where we will think negatively about ourselves. That is a very typical thing to do. We recognize that a lot of it is not coming from us. It's coming from our experiences. It's coming from our past experiences and relating to where we are now. But the big thing in this is that knowing that that is time limited. It doesn't have to stay that way. Our sense of where we're at in our self-esteem and our responses to our everyday life in the here and now is not who we are. The core of who we are is still there, even when we're in those periods, and will return when those barriers are removed. And the knowing that regardless of what comes around the corner, that we do have this, we've got this, we can manage this. And if we've got that and recognize that, you know what, I have my choices to make, I can be me and I can be happy with that. That is what we want to do going forward. And if we can all try and do that and recognize that for everyone should be given the opportunity to do that without being told to change and be a different person, then I think everyone will get along a lot better. And that's collaboration.
I think we've got this, Steve.
I think we've got this. Yeah.
And how can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through the Diverse Minds website, and they can email through there and contact the clinic, and I'll be happy to respond from there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for inviting me, Karen.
Okay, thank you.